Hey, it's Sam from Sugar Spun Run, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make my favorite vanilla cupcakes. This recipe makes soft, springy cupcakes with an incredible vanilla bean buttercream frosting. To begin, you're going to want to get your oven preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the first thing you need for today's recipe is sugar. You need 3/4 cup of granulated sugar, and anytime you're baking, I really recommend using a kitchen scale. I will link to this one. It's my favorite. It's very inexpensive, like 10 bucks on Amazon, but a kitchen scale and using weights to measure your ingredients is really the best way to level up your baking and make sure you end up at home with the same results that you see me having here on YouTube or wherever you're watching this. So I've added my bowl, I've tiered my scale, and now I'm going to add 3/4 cup or 150 grams of granulated sugar. All of my recipes have weight measurements in the printable recipe. All right, the next thing you're going to need is 1/4 cup or 50 grams of firmly packed light brown sugar. I love using a little bit of light brown sugar in this recipe because it really helps to bring out that vanilla flavor. I mean, vanilla and brown sugar, they complement each other so well. So just a little bit goes a long way. We're also going to be using butter in today's recipe. I've tried this recipe many different ways, including with oil. I go into that in some detail on my blog post, but butter really yielded the most delicious, prettiest cupcake. So that's what I ultimately went with. This is 6 tablespoons of softened unsalted butter. Now, today's recipe could be made in a stand mixer, but today I'm just going to be using my electric hand mixer instead. We're going to cream the butter and sugar together until they are light and fluffy and creamy and well combined. Now, creaming the butter and sugar like we just did is important for helping the cupcake get the proper texture and a little bit of lift, so it is important that you beat those together really well before proceeding. Now, the next ingredient you're going to need is 1 large egg. Crack this in a separate bowl. Here we go. It's a tricky one. That one egg didn't want to break. We'll add this to our mixing bowl. We're also going to add our vanilla extract. You need 1½ teaspoons, which gives these vanilla cupcakes their nice vanilla flavor. Now stir these into our batter. And in case I didn't mention it a moment ago, the egg that I used was a large egg and it was also room temperature. I really recommend using room temperature eggs in baking unless otherwise indicated. All right, this is looking pretty good. I'm going to slide it out of the way so that we can focus on our dry ingredients. So in a separate mixing bowl, we'll go ahead and tare that on our scale. And tearing just means we're setting it to 0. That way we're not accounting for the weight of the actual bowl. We're going to add 1 1/3 cups or 167 grams of all-purpose flour. Now, if anyone struggles with this recipe, it's usually because they're accidentally adding either too little or too much flour, which is unfortunately really easy to do with baked goods and is why I recommend using a kitchen scale instead of using standard, which aren't really super standard, kitchen measuring cups. All right, let's also add our leavening agents, 1/2 teaspoon baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and then for flavor, we're also going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We're just using table salt here. Let's whisk these together. We want everything nicely combined. All right, let's bring back our butter mixture. And before we start combining these ingredients, you're also going to want to measure out some buttermilk. You'll need 3/4 cup of buttermilk. I do have a recipe for a buttermilk substitute, but for this vanilla cupcake recipe, I really recommend using actual buttermilk. It just is going to give you better results. It's also going to give you more flavorful results. So sometimes that substitute works great. Here, I prefer to use actual buttermilk. Now you're done with your mixer at this point. These next steps we're going to be doing by hand. We'll take our flour mixture and we're going to add like 1/3 of that. It was actually more like 1/4. And I'm going to gently fold this into the batter until it's mostly combined. And once it is, I'm going to add about 1/3 of my buttermilk. And we'll fold this in until it's just combined. And we will repeat that until we've added all of our flour mixture and all of our buttermilk. I like this alternating method because it makes it more difficult to accidentally overmix the batter. It helps us to evenly combine our ingredients. It also is preferable for your buttermilk to be at room temperature like the rest of your ingredients. Now my recipe makes an even dozen cupcakes. If you want to double it, you can. It works great being doubled. Now with this recipe, we're also taking care to not over mix the batter, which is why I'm not using an electric mixer, the last of our buttermilk there, and why I prefer to do this by hand. It makes it a lot harder to accidentally overwork the batter. If you do overmix it, you could end up with dense, dry cupcakes, which nobody wants. All right, so we started and ended with our flour there. So you don't want to overmix this, but you do want the batter to be uniform in appearance and well combined. This batter already smells good and it's not even in the oven yet. All right, as I said, we're going to be making 12 cupcakes. We're going to evenly divide this cupcake batter into our cupcake tin. And I love using an ice cream scoop for this, just because it's a lot neater than using a pair of spoons. I always make a mess when I do that. Now I'm filling the liners about 1/2 to 2/3 of the way full. I don't want to overfill them. So this is one instance where if I have a little bit of extra cupcake batter, I'm not going to force it into the pan. I don't like to waste cupcake batter, but what can happen if you add too much is it can spread over the cupcake tin and they're just not going to look very nice and they're not going to be very easy to remove from the pan. All right, we'll take these over to our 350-degree Fahrenheit preheated oven where they're going to need to bake for about 16 minutes. A good test that they're done is if you lightly touch the cupcake, it should spring back to the touch and a toothpick inserted in the center should come out clean or with a few moist crumbs. Now we're going to let these cool in the pan for about 10 minutes and then we'll carefully remove them to a cooling rack to cool completely before we decorate them with frosting. Removing the cupcakes like this will help prevent that condensation and moisture that can happen. If you've ever had a cupcake where the liner was really oily on the bottom, it usually happens from sitting in the pan too long. While the cupcakes cool, we can prepare our frosting. You can use any kind of frosting you'd like, and I originally shared this recipe years ago with my favorite chocolate frosting, which is a great choice, but today I am sharing what I like to think of as an exclusive vanilla bean frosting. Call it exclusive because I haven't shared it anywhere else on the website or on YouTube. This comes together super fast. You'll need 1 cup of softened unsalted butter, or use salted butter and leave out the salt that I call for. And we are going to add just a pinch of salt, just a little less than a 1/4 teaspoon. And we'll stir this butter until it's nice and creamy and smooth. Then we'll gradually add our sugar. You're going to need 3 cups of powdered sugar for this, which is 375 grams, but I've already measured mine out. And you do want to add this pretty slowly to try to minimize your chance of powdered sugar flying all over you and your kitchen. This recipe makes a lot of frosting. I wanted to make sure it made enough that you could use as much icing as I used on the photos on my website. I like to use a lot, but if you're a minimalist who doesn't like much, you could probably get away with cutting this recipe in half. You know, if you like just like a little smear on top each cupcake. All right, next thing you need is either 1 scraped vanilla bean. You can scrape your vanilla bean pod right into the bowl with icing, or you can use vanilla bean paste instead, which is what I'm going to be using. I'll be adding a tablespoon of vanilla bean paste, which adds a really nice flavor. I like using this ingredient for some things, like sometimes with my shortbread cookies or my Neapolitan cookies I recently shared. Make sure I get all of that in there. We'll stir this in. So we have some nice vanilla bean flecks going on there. Another thing I like to do is I'll check the consistency of the frosting. And I like to just kind of lightly whip it a little bit. I don't want to make it too soft. So I'm going to start by adding a tablespoon of heavy cream. And I'm going to beat this until it's just combined. Then I'll increase the speed to high and whip it for a couple of seconds. If it's still not as light and fluffy as you'd like, you can add more cream, just add a splash at a time because you don't want to end up with a wet frosting. Once I'm happy with the texture, you could of course just spread this on the cupcakes, but I like to put mine in a piping bag. This is a piping bag that I have fitted with the Attico 848 tip, which is one of my favorites. And we can go ahead and pipe this on our cupcakes. All right, so I had some friends join me and they're going to help with the decorating. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing the cupcakes. What do you guys like, a lot of frosting or a little frosting?
A lot.
A lot? Who would have guessed? So one of the reasons I like this 848 tip is because you can do big mountains of icing. Yeah, put it on the cupcake, or you can do these little rosettes. That's a lot of sprinkles, guys.
Not by accident.
Yeah, no, they look beautiful. Thanks, guys. And that is how you make my favorite vanilla cupcakes with a vanilla bean frosting. I hope you like these as much as my kids are enjoying the sprinkles. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. All right, you ready to try them?
Yeah.
Let's see how they are. Go ahead. How is it, guys?
Good.
Is it good? This is a nice soft cupcake, isn't it? I think you're a little more focused on the sprinkles. That was really good. Did you try any cupcake or just sprinkles?
The icing and sprinkles.
How is it? Can you try the cupcake and tell me what you think? How's the cupcake, Rhett?
Icing, mom.
Icing and sprinkles. How's the cake part?